everybody. Welcome to Innovation Guelph presents Toolkit Tuesday. Today's session is all about priorities. The leader's top priority, employee engagement. So our employees, either current or future, have an unbelievable amount of potential. But how do we unlock that? And how do we optimize individual, team, and organizational performance? And how do we know what to do and what not to do? Lucky for us, Michael Brenchley of Work Better Consulting is here today, and he's going to talk to us and teach us about how we as leaders can unlock the potential of others. But first, I have just a little bit of housekeeping. Today's session will be recorded and posted publicly on Innovation Guelph's YouTube channel. We ask that you turn off your mics for the presentation, and if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat box below. Jordan will be monitoring the conversation and will pose your questions directly to Michael when we have the right minute to do so, either throughout the presentation or definitely during the last 30 minutes of today's session during the interactive Q&A component. So to experience today's presentation in American Sign Language, please pan or spotlight Michael and both of the interpreters, Liz and Candace, to the top of your gallery. In addition, anyone in the session today can access the Zoom closed caption function by clicking on the closed captioning button at the bottom of your screen. Funny enough, I never introduced myself. So I am Mickey Campo. I'm a program manager at Innovation Guelph, and I'm super happy that you guys joined us for this session today. I'd like to take a minute also to thank our corporate sponsors, ISU Software Corporation, Marexis, OKR Financial, Reese Informatica, Invest in Ottawa, and BDO. So we're very grateful for their generosity and their support in everything that we do. But in addition, Sign Language Interpreting Associates of Ottawa, we really thank you for our promotional translation at today's Toolkit Tuesday session, but also at all of our Toolkit Tuesday sessions. So thank you for joining us. Quickly, before I hand over the screen to Michael, I'd like to briefly introduce you also to Innovation Guelph. Many of you are familiar with who we are as an organization, but there are also plenty of you on the call today that may not know too much about Innovation Guelph. In 17 regional innovation centers in Ontario, and while we're located in Guelph, we serve the entire region of Southern Ontario and actually have one national program too. So what that means is that we have clients all the way from B.C. to Nova Scotia and all throughout Southern Ontario as well. We're proud of the work that we do with our clients. We offer support and guidance and mentorship to businesses in all different stages. So if you're a scaling company or you're a startup company or you're anything in between, we have programs that can be a fit for you. I'm going to let you read all about us and what we do on our website. I'm not going to take any more of your time talking about Innovation Guelph, but I would really love for you to visit the website, sign up for a newsletter, follow us on social media, those kinds of things, so you can stay apprised of these kinds of sessions that we run. I'm not going to take my time and pass things over to Michael. So Michael, over to you. I welcome you to share your screen and get started on today's presentation.
Awesome. Thanks, Mickey.
Thank you.
All right. Can everybody see my screen? Give me a thumbs up. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, again, thank you, Mickey, and thanks to Innovation Guelph. I really appreciate this opportunity to share some information with all of you folks, and thank you all for joining on this snowy, blustery February day. I know it's probably busy time after a long weekend, or was it a long weekend? I don't know. I have no idea what day of the week it actually is. So it's good to have you all here, and looking forward to sharing with you some of the lessons I've learned through 20 years of business, often the hard way. And also around the subject of managing people and employee engagement, and in particular the last couple of years in my pursuit of an HR specialization in the CHRP, as well as study of culture and values. And throughout all of that, it's for those of you who are in this field, it seems that it can't be denied that employee engagement is becoming a pretty hot topic. As more and more research comes to light, as companies start to come to terms with the fact that really and truly what differentiates our companies from our competitors is our employees. And so putting a focus and an emphasis on making sure, as Mickey said so well in her introduction, that we're optimizing those employees, doing what's best for them in order to improve their performance. That's what this is all about. And so I'm going to make the case today that employee engagement really ought to be your top priority as a leader. And some of you may be a little bit skeptical, like, really, is that my top priority? I've got a lot of other priorities. I got to make sure my customers are happy. I need to increase my revenues. I need to reduce costs, manage my financials. I need to recruit and retain people. How do I improve quality? How do I improve efficiency? Well, again, I'm going to make the case that really and truly, if you focus on employee engagement and make that the center of where you put your attention as a leader, then all of those things and more will be positively impacted. So my objective today then really is to talk about employee engagement, obviously, define it, explain what it is, why it matters, how it connects to performance, how to measure it. And of course, once we know all that, the ultimate objective is how do we go about making it better? So the second half of the presentation is I've provided a list of 7 tips practical tips to boost employee engagement. So that's what I'm hoping that you'll come away with a good understanding of that. But really and truly, I want to understand why you are here. I've sat through enough presentations, especially back in the old days, where you'd go into a meeting and you'd sit down and 10 minutes in, you're going, this isn't what I was expecting. But it was pretty hard to get up and leave in those live situations, whereas now you can just hit that little red exit meeting button. But nevertheless, I want to make sure that you've devoted some time to attend this. What would make this valuable for you? So please, as Mickey pointed out, put your comments, questions, what challenges are you dealing with? Put them into the chat box. What information are you looking for? What help do you need? Jordan is going to kindly curate those and ensure that I get to those questions. Hopefully, I'll be able to address a lot of those sort of throughout the content, but I'll make sure and pause and give you time to really ask those questions. And then, of course, at the end, there's time for Q&A as well. So get those put those objectives into your chat box. The other thing I want to do is make sure I understand who you are. I like to know who my audience is so that I can kind of tailor the message and make sure this is as relevant as possible for you. So Jordan is going to post up a couple of quick survey questions just to get an understanding of the audience. So Jordan, if you wouldn't mind going ahead with that. First question being.
Can everyone see the first question here? We're getting some responses, so I think so.
Great. Yeah. So just quick, very simple. Who are you? What is your leadership responsibility? What role do you play? Are you a sole contributor or are you a team leader, manager of people? So seeing some results there. So yeah, good mix of team leaders and sole contributors. That's great. And by the way, I do talk about this as being a leader's top priority, employee engagement being a leader's top priority. But the reality is employee engagement is not solely the leader's responsibility. Obviously, kind of like, personal development, we can't just simply rely on the leaders to cause employee engagement to happen. A certain amount of that applies to us individually as well. And so it's important that, I want to make sure that there's some information in here that we as individuals can use to kind of think about our own engagement in the workplace and kind of what we can do and how we can make sure we are as engaged as possible. Okay, so question 2 is what department or function do you work in? So are you HR, are you finance, are you sales, marketing, customer support? Jordan, if you could post up that second question.
Yep, just bear with me 1 second because I have to set them up on the fly here.
Oh, sorry, okay.
So it'll just be 10 seconds. And that one doesn't want to launch. I'm not sure why.
Okay, are you able to do the third one? Is that?
I can't get a new one to launch. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Okay, no worries. That's okay. So maybe just in the chat box.
Oh, sorry. There you go.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah, so just tell us kind of what your role is within your organization so I can kind of get a sense of what folks are up to during the day and to tie that into what I'm talking about. Wow, that's a real even mix of roles and responsibilities there. That's great. So, all right, great, thank you. Jordan, will you be able to do the third one? Is that doable?
Yep, 1 second.
Okay. So the third question is, I really kind of wanted to get a sense of people's experience with employee surveys, employee studies, getting feedback from the employee base in terms of, in a survey sort of format. And so, when did your organization last conduct an employee survey? That's what I'm curious about.
And there we go.
Right. So within the last 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, more than 2 years, or never.
And Michael, someone had a good point about our last question for our sole proprietors. All of the above wasn't an option. So there are a couple of us who had all of the above as our choice for our second poll as well.
Right, right. Good point. Yeah. Okay. I think we've got some pretty good answers there. So again, a bit of a mix of recent and a fair number within the last year, 6 months, 3 months, and some 2 years. Nobody's saying more than 2 years or never, so that's good. Okay, excellent. Thank you, and thanks, Jordan. So that's good to know. That gives me, as I say, a good understanding of who my audience is. So I want to start off really by talking about the big picture and just kind of think about the state of the world today. I know that there's a lot of words that we would use to describe it. It's topsy-turvy, it's crazy, it's upside down, it's it's the new normal, it's unprecedented, all that sort of thing. But there was a term that was coined actually quite a while ago, back in the 80s, at the end of the Cold War, and it was a military organization that coined this term to kind of encapsulate what the crazy and unprecedented state of what was going on after the Cold War. And that term is VUCA, which some of you may be familiar with, but it's an acronym. And the VUCA is 4 words. The V stands for volatility. And so it talks about the ever-changing instability, constant change that's just coming at us left, right, and center. And it just seems to be endless. U stands for uncertainty. So all those question marks about what's coming next, where are we going from here? Is there, what's the next, is the new COVID variant going to have an effect on us? When's this going to end? When's the next one coming? The future just isn't clear. That's all that uncertainty. C stands for complexity. So, as make this build, as information, we get inundated with all this information and data, and multiple stakeholders are involved, and just situations just seem to get more and more complex. we kind of become overloaded with all this stuff and technology advancement. So all that complexity is rolling around as well. And then there's A for ambiguity, and which is, that idea of, there's so much information, a lot of it is conflicting. There's no clear direction. There's no, there's multiple answers. There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. It's difficult to decide which direction to go. So, so that's kind of a good encapsulation, I think, of the world. And that, as I say, that's been going on long before the pandemic. It's affecting us as individuals. It affects our levels of stress. It affects our ability, our health, our mental health, our physical health. And it's important to understand it also has an impact on the workplace. And in the workplace, there's definitely some pre-existing kind of conditions that have been going on for a long time that aren't going away anytime soon. And all of these are just being magnified by the pandemic. So, we obviously, physical health is a critical issue right now as we try to keep our employees safe and ensure people aren't getting infected. There's mental health issues, stress and pressure of all these changes and this VUCA thing that's going on, as well as just the regular stress and strains of running a business and trying to keep everything moving forward. In fact, there's a study by a company called Morneau Chappell that found that Canadians' mental health dipped to its lowest point just this past December, ever in history. So that's a concern. Workplace culture. We keep hearing these stories of workplaces that are defined as unhealthy, toxic, where there's harassment. Only the most recent and most public example being the Governor General's office, for heaven's sakes. It's an ongoing challenge and issue, and exacerbated by leadership, or the lack of leadership, which is routinely cited as a common source of workplace stress and dysfunction, whereas leadership should be the where people turn to for help and guidance and support. In fact, a Gallup poll showed that 50% of workers have left a job just to get away from a manager. So all these things are having a massive impact. They're causing people to be stressed and burnt out. People have to be off work, so absenteeism. Eventually they give up and they decide, I just can't work here anymore, so they leave. It's affecting productivity and output. It's declining rates of productivity and innovation, quality, performance. All these things impacted by these stressors. And from a financial perspective, there's a Canadian government report that showed that the cost, 20 billion, is the cost of psychological issues, mental health issues. That's the cost related to work, is the cost of the Canadian economy. So it's a staggering dollar figure, and the impact on our health, our welfare is significant. So, as business leaders, we need to be aware of this stuff. And, I'm sorry to kind of start off by bumming you all out on some, this is kind of like, bad news. But, I think as leaders, we need to face the truth and face up to the facts that these challenges exist. And it's our responsibility to do what we can to make things better and, help our employees, help ourselves, help our companies, help society as a whole to overcome these issues and improve. And so I really firmly believe that a great place to start with that is with employee engagement. And so that's what we're going to talk about. And let's start that with a definition. So as I said, I've spent some time over the last couple of years studying HR and organizational behavior and so on. And seen a variety of different definitions for employee engagement. This is one that that I think is good. An individual's emotional and cognitive motivation, particularly focused, intense, persistent, and purposive effort towards work-related goals. Now, you're probably looking at that going, what does that mean? And I have to admit, it was one of those definitions. It's a textbook definition that you kind of have to read a couple of times for it to make sense. But a couple of the key words to me are emotional and cognitive motivation. So that speaks to the fact that employee engagement is tied into both the way that you think and also the way that you feel. And then it talks about being focused, intense, persistent, purposive. Is that a word? I've never even heard that one before. But anyway, so that's one definition. But for me, I find that these kinds of concepts are far easier to understand if I kind of put it in terms of my own experience. And so I want to do a little bit of a visualization exercise. So I'd like you to just take a moment and think back to a time when you felt engaged in an activity. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be a work activity, but think about something that you were doing, whether it's a sporting event or a hobby, or you're painting or cooking, something where you were so focused and energized and excited about what you're doing, and that time basically disappeared, right? And think about some of those words that describe how that felt, right? Because there's a certain portion of employee engagement that is that intrinsic feeling of engagement. And so I'm just going to build this slide. Hopefully these are some of the words that you're thinking of. So we're very focused, right? There's no distractions. You're on it. You're driven. You're motivated. You're energized. There's a level of excitement. You feel a purpose. You're kind of in the flow, right? That just time goes away and nothing else matters. There's a feeling of euphoria, almost optimism, right? You're enthusiastic. You're all in. You're committed. We feel capable. This is something I know I can do, and I'm good at it. I'm confident. I feel positive. There's a sense of well-being. I'm in the moment, balanced. I feel trusted. I feel inspired. Right. So I hopefully those are some of the words that you also are thinking of. If there's others, again, put them in the chat box. And the last thing I would add in this picture of Jamie Oliver, you may be familiar with, because I just like if you look at that picture and look at his eyes, that is the definition of engagement. And if you ever want to get inspired, first of all, I love Jamie Oliver. I think he's a great chef and he's got great recipes, and I use his recipe books all the time. But I also just love watching him because he's just so into what he's doing. He's so engaged, and it's inspiring, and it's fun to watch. So check him out if you need a boost, and also if you're looking for some good recipes. So that's that intrinsic aspect of employee engagement, is how we feel when we're engaged. But what about when we're part of a team? So when we are engaged with another group, what are some of those? How does that feel? Well, again, here's some words to describe that. We tend to feel like we're part of something bigger, a whole. We're connected. We feel included. We're aligned with the rest of the group and united. We feel trusted. Our opinions matter and they count, right? We feel a sense of safety. We don't feel any particular risk, so we're able to be ourselves and to be open and suggest ideas without fear of reprisal. We all have a common goal. We feel productive, respected. There's opportunity that we're going for, There's equality, efficiency, right? So that's kind of how it feels. And that's what we're aiming for in our teams, to create that feeling of engagement. So, I started with that textbook definition, but I think, expressing those feelings in that situation of being engaged is a better explanation of what employee engagement means and what it feels like. And it's no surprise that people or groups that are in that state are going to perform better. And that's not just a theory. There's a lot of research, tons and tons of research over the last couple of years that have reinforced this notion of employee engagement as being, a precursor to high performance. Companies like giant companies like Gallup, ADP, DecisionWise, who have very highly sophisticated research procedure, conducting research in a way that truly is valid, reliable. They're spending millions of dollars literally to understand what employee engagement is and making that connection to performance. And that information is available. It's easy to find. And it just continuously validates this point. And so I'm sorry, I'm going to roll out a whole bunch of just straight old statistics here for you, but the impact of employee engagement based on all these studies is profound. And I'll just let this roll out. Improved customer loyalty, higher productivity, your companies are more profitable, there's less turnover, fewer safety incidents, less absenteeism, less shrinkage, theft, improved quality, people are healthier, and improved organizational citizenship. So which means people more willing to do what's right for the company, talk highly of the company, take time outside of their work hours to promote the company, that sort of thing. So it's employee engagement is a real impactful thing, and it's important that we focus on it. Another study that I really like, there was Aon Hewitt did a study, and this was a while back, but still very relevant. So they looked at, they basically took two groups of companies and compared their performance over a 10-year period. So the red line represents a subset of the group of companies on the bottom. And obviously, I don't know if you can see the details there, but the return on investment is what they're measuring over a 10-year span. And so you can see, obviously, the red line companies have a much higher return on investment than the blue line. What's the difference between those two groups of companies? Well, the bottom group was the S&P average over that span of time. So the S&P 500 group of companies, the average annual return, and their return was 4% on average. The red line were the top 40 best companies to work for over that same period. And their returns were 4 times the average. So clearly, having an engaged, motivated, happy workforce that believes that this is the best company to work for has a direct impact on financial performance. So really what, I guess the question now is, okay, so engagement matters, it has an impact. So what does it actually look like? What do we see when we look in general across the board at companies worldwide, nationally, et cetera, to see sort of how, what is the engagement levels? What are we seeing? So essentially, it's pretty straightforward. There's two groups. There's companies who have employees who are engaged. Let me restate that. There are employees who are engaged and there is employees who are not engaged. And every company probably has some mix of that. The not engaged is there's a subset of those who are not engaged between non-engaged and actively disengaged. So not only are people, there's some people who are just sort of putting in the time, right? They're doing, it's the minimal effort. They're low performing, low quality. They don't really care that much. They're not particularly happy. And their CX, their the customer experience from those employees is low. Within that group, there's a group who are actively disengaged. So there's some people who are so unengaged and you know, unhappy with what they're doing, that they're actually destructive to the organization. Not only are they not performing, they could actually be counterproductive. They might be harmful and disruptive. They may be causing bad things to happen within your company. You know, their customer experience, obviously, you don't want those people talking to your customers. In the risk level at the bottom of that slide, those are risks related to your reputation, risks related to financials, risks related to those people leaving the company. In a way, you want those actively disengaged people. You probably do want them to leave. So that's the not engaged. And on the engaged side, again, there's two sort of subsets. And so there's the people who are kind of somewhat engaged. You know, they're doing okay. Their performance is sort of average, but they're not super interested in the company. They're really there to do the job and go home. Their risk is moderate. And then there's the fully engaged people, and those are high performing, high achievement. They're killing it. They're all in. They're motivated. Those are the high engagement folks. And risks obviously with that group is quite low. So that's kind of the spectrum, and every organization probably has some mix of those types of employees that fall in those categories. And you know, obviously we want our employees to be as much as possible shifting over to the right side of that slide. And you know, the reality is it's not a static picture. Some people will move back and forth depending on situation, depending on, you know, there could be some personal situations going on. Somebody might be somewhat engaged one day and fully engaged another day. Or they may become non-engaged if things don't improve, or if, you know, if some other crisis happens. So, you know, it's important to know that even with a mix like this, all is not lost. There's opportunity for us as leaders to look at those, especially those two middle columns, and say, what can we do to move them to the right, right? Another point I want to make on this slide is that there's also this notion of or a term called employee satisfaction. And it's important to know that employee satisfaction is kind of a subset of employee engagement. Employee satisfaction, and you know, a lot of companies conduct employee satisfaction surveys on a regular basis. That's not the same as employee engagement. Employee satisfaction means just what it says. They're just satisfied, which means that I could be coming in, doing the bare minimum amount of work, collecting a paycheck. Hey, I'm satisfied, right? But I'm not engaged. I'm not motivated. I'm not doing extra. I'm not coming up with new ideas because I'm satisfied. I can do it. You know, I'm happy to just do the bare minimum. So it's important to make that distinction between satisfaction and engagement. Engagement is next level. Okay, so that's kind of the spectrum. So what is the actual, what's the reality of the mix of these kinds of employees? So in a study that Gallup did, this is the results. So we can see that 10% on average across the board, and of course is going to vary by organization, but in general, 10% are actively disengaged. 59% are in that not engaged category. 15% are engaged, somewhat engaged, and 16% fully engaged. So the dark blue and light blue segments are the engaged section. That adds up to a measly 31%. That means out of 10 employees, only 3 are engaged and committed to the job, and 7 are not engaged. So when you think about that, if you had any other part of your organization that was operating at that level of efficiency, so if you had a machine that was only working three days out of 10, you would do something about it, right? You would take steps to make it better. And so that's what we want to talk about, is how do we make that better? Well, the first step is measurement. So we need to understand exactly what is it that, where are our employees? What is their level of engagement? And there's a variety of different tools available to do that. Barrett is the one I like. It's the one that I promote because it centers really on employee values and looks at the alignment between values, individual values and organizational values, and kind of the positive values and potentially limiting values and ratios, and kind of gets it right down to the heart of what is it that's motivating employees and what's causing them to be not motivated and therefore not engaged. But there's others. ADP does a survey, has surveys available. Gallup has their Q12 employee engagement survey, which is kind of considered the gold standard in the industry, decision-wise, and there's many others. So it's so there's lots of tools available. The key, of course, being once we know what those levels are, what do we do about it? So measurement's really just the first step, and we do want to make it better. And so that's why I offer 7 tips to boost employee engagement. But I want to pause here because that's a lot of info to absorb, and take any questions. Jordan, anything specific I should be going back over?
Nothing's come up yet. We had a couple people offer some other words when we were talking about engaged, what engaged feels like. So we had someone call it a bliss moment, that they felt supported. And Denise said tribal, collective, and inspired were some other words that describe that for her. But yeah, we encourage anyone to post questions they have in the chat up until this point. But other than that, no.
Okay. All right. Cool. How's we for time?
Oh, Kim at the beginning offered kind of a thought into what she would like to get out of the session today.
Yep.
Said tips for work from home employees and best engagement styles that's not video. So she was hoping that you maybe touch on that a little bit today too.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, it's a good one. There's, well, before I answer, I'll also add that there's some good. I just watched a webinar by who the heck was it now? I'll have to think of the name, but it was basically, it was Communitech. So the folks in Waterloo that do similar things there that Innovation Guelph does, they did a recent webinar on that topic, particularly what managing people in a remote kind of situation and best practices. But I think as I get into my 7 tips, you'll see some ideas there that will help answer that question, and I'll make sure and cover off on those.
We do have a question. Denise is wondering, or sorry, not Denise, Deanna, would you recommend those surveys that you talked about and measurement tools, do you recommend those be anonymous?
Yes, generally speaking, you know, so the challenge is that in a workplace situation where an employee is feeling potentially, you know, who's not engaged, you know, ask the question, what's causing that lack of engagement? As I said, there's a high percentage of people who feel disengaged end up leaving a company because of their manager. And so, you know, we want to be careful that we're not excluding those people who are, you know, in fear of reprisal, heaven forbid, for being truthful about the situation. And so anonymity is good. But I would also argue that as a manager, and I'm going to talk about this in a couple of minutes, but as a manager, it's your responsibility to be having conversations with people on a regular basis, so that and creating a safe space so that they feel comfortable telling you the truth about what they're feeling, right, and experiencing in the workplace. And so that's a key part of it as well. Not just the formal survey, but also the ongoing day-to-day management of dialoguing with people, you know, giving them opportunity to talk about what they're dealing with.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. That's all that popped up so far.
Okay, thanks for the question. Okay, so without further ado, here's my 7 practical tips to boost employee engagement. Tip number 1. So let me start by saying your company, whether it was founded by you or someone else, exists for a reason. And by the way, that reason is not to make money. You know, you think about all the companies in all the world, they all started with an idea, a purpose. Somebody thought to themselves, hey, I think there's something that's needed, some way I can make things better, a better product, a better service, right? Some way I can help make society better and give people something that they need. So, you know, that's what you need to think about. And those old style mission statements of, you know, they're focused on profits and growth and shareholder value, those don't work anymore. Those are antiquated and demoralizing. And you know, we need to go back to what is our company's purpose, and what is its just cause? Why does this company exist? Right? So it's really important to define your mission or your purpose or your just cause. And it's important to make it simple, straightforward, positive. If you need help with this, I highly recommend this book by Simon Sinek. I think Simon Sinek is endlessly brilliant. This book is full of practical ideas about how to how to manage, but also how to define your just cause and make it so that it's effective and people can buy into it, and so on and so forth. Check that book out. That's a great one. Once you've got that defined, you need to talk about it, right? Like, make sure people understand. Make sure your employees understand, your customers. And critical to this is connecting that mission to the work effort. So as an employee, I've got a particular set of responsibilities. If I know that what I'm doing is helping us achieve that mission, that purpose, that just cause, I'm going to be way more inspired to keep at it, to dig in, I'm going to be motivated to do it well, right? And so the benefits are of a clear, defined purpose, just cause is you're giving your people something to rally around, right? You're inspiring a desire, a want. It ignites passion in people to be part of something bigger than themselves, to contribute to a higher calling, right? So a good mission statement is going to inspire enthusiasm and commitment, collaboration, and ultimately lead to a more engaged workforce. And not only will your workforce be more engaged, but your customers are going to get it as well, right? So if you think about it, if you're let's say you're a home builder, one potential mission statement might be, we build houses that provide customers with a great return on investment. Yeah, maybe not that inspiring. What if you said instead, we provide beautiful homes for families to raise their children in comfort and safety, right? That is something that people can rally around, that can, inspire them to join a cause that it's going to help make something better. So clarify your company's purpose. Tip number 2, define company core values. It's my firm belief that every company, large or small, should have a set of core values that are clearly spelled out for everyone. A company without core values is kind of like an airplane without a navigation system. Core values provide guidelines. They tell people what you're about. They support your mission statement. Done well, they help explain your why and reinforce that just cause that you're aiming for. As I said, they provide behavioral guidelines. They give people an idea of what is and isn't okay in terms of behavior. It, helps with decision making, especially in this crazy VUCA world with all the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. How do we decide what to do when everything is unprecedented? Well, if you have core values as a framework as for what's important to your company, then you can refer back to those and be able to make those decisions. And it also gives people the ability to make decisions for themselves, so that you as a manager don't have to constantly be micromanaging and telling people what to do and how to think. They have a much better possibility of thinking for themselves, right? And so some of the best practices are, keep it simple, keep it memorable. One of the best core value statements I ever heard. We were in a meeting with an IT reseller out in Calgary, and we were talking about how they were doing. They were killing it. They were selling like mad. They had all kinds of growth. Customers were happy. And he's like, "What do you guys do that's so great?" And the president said, "Well, we have 3 simple values: show up, follow up, don't be a douchebag." And I apologize for the language, but and we had that meeting 10 years ago, and I to this day have never forgotten that. Show up, follow up, don't be. It's simple, it's straightforward, and we kind of think, well, what does that mean? Well, show up, well, that means be committed, right? That's a value. Follow up. If you make a promise, make sure that you keep it. That's integrity, right? So commitment, integrity. Don't be a douchebag. I mean, be nice, be kind, be thoughtful. Don't cheat. So what a great simple way to define what your core values are. Simple, memorable, and it gets people engaged, and they know what's expected and how to behave. The other benefit of core values is gives you a way to manage your culture. So culture is really just the accumulation of all the individual values of all the people in the organization. And so if those values are somewhat aligned and directed by you as a leader, then you have the opportunity to manage that culture. You can measure it. You can make changes to it. You can sort of figure out where there's falling down. If trust is a value and people seem to be hoarding information, for example, well, that seems like maybe there's a trust issue. So maybe there's something we can do about that, right? So it gives you a way to manage your culture. And the other bonus is it's a great, it's a great brand support. I'm pretty sure most of us today, when we want to buy something or invest somewhere or participate in something, we're going to look at, is this company ethical? Are they green? Do they care about the environment? Do they care about social responsibility? Right? Values help express those important aspects of your company. So promote them, right? Talk about them, put them on your website, and people will buy into that. People don't buy what you do, as Simon Sinek says, they buy why you do it. So the benefits are that you promote autonomy. Your employees have the ability to make decisions for themselves because they know they're clear on your values. You can manage their performance. Doing a job is not just what you do, but how you do it. So how do you resolve disputes? How do you work with other people? How do you make decisions? Those are all related to our values. So it's a way to manage people's performance. It supports your branding, as I said. It also helps get better employees, because you can now at the hiring stage look for people whose values somewhat align with yours, right? And so you can screen out those people who potentially have the right skills, but their values are different and aren't going to stick around long, right? And so you have better hiring, better retention, better alignment. And as I said, it's a cultural barometer. So take a look at your values. Again, Barrett's is the company that I'm familiar with that does a lot around this and assessing values and helping define values. A book I came across recently, The Core Value Equation, also really good practical guidelines and tips for putting in place a set of values. And if you're familiar with the book In Search of Excellence, that came out, I think it was like in the early 80s. It was a long time ago. And these guys, it's considered sort of a Bible of business management. And through all their research, Peters and Waterman found that values is a critical aspect of successful companies. So take time to define your core values. Okay, tip number 3, lead with compassion. I actually struggled with this title a little bit because I wanted to use the word love there, but I thought I might come across as a bit, I don't know. But really what made me think about it is that old debate, around leadership, which is, would you rather be loved or feared as a leader? Right? And I guess, the thing is, no matter what, as a leader, our objective is to optimize performance, right? We want to have people bring their full selves to work and contribute and be engaged in what they're doing. And so those people that say, oh, I'd rather be feared, I kind of like getting into those debates because I can drop a bit of science on them. So I don't know if you're familiar, anybody who's got a bit of a biology or chemistry background might recognize that molecule picture there on the right is cortisol. And cortisol is the human stress hormone. And cortisol gets released when our level of stress goes up. It's the response to that sort of fight or flight feeling, and basically what happens is it dumps glucose into the bloodstream. Along with adrenaline, it shuts down sort of higher level thinking and focuses our energy and resources on being ready for either to run away or to fight. And so a certain level of cortisol and a certain level of stress isn't a bad thing as long as it eventually goes away. But over the long term, unfortunately, if a high level of, or if a level of stress is maintained over a duration or period of time, there's definitely some negative physical effects. It affects, it causes anxiety. Long term, it causes anxiety, depression, sleep issues, eating disorders, as well as heart disease. So it's not a good thing. We need to make sure that we don't put people into situations where their cortisol levels are raised over a long period of time, because eventually they're going to become sick and they're going to drop out. So that's argument number one. We don't want to put people in a state of fear when they're at work, because long term that's a bad thing. Argument number two is the good old Yerkes-Dodson law of psychological performance, which basically says that, as you can see in the diagram, as our stress levels increase, our arousal increases, performance goes up initially, but then it plateaus, and if the stress levels continue to increase, then our performance actually starts to drop off. And so they did a ton of research and found that this is common to every single human being. Now the characteristics of the curve may differ slightly, or definitely do differ slightly by person based on the slope or the height of the curve, as we all react differently to different levels of stress. But the fact is that we all have an optimal arousal level for optimal performance. And so if, as leaders, our job is to not exceed that, right? And so do we want to lead by love or fear? The answer is love. And if you're not sure, think about how as an employee, when you think about your favorite manager that you've ever worked for, do you say to yourself, oh, that was the best manager I ever worked for, we were terrified of him? No, you say you love them, right? So you want, that's the reaction that we hope to inspire in our people. And so how do we do that? Well, first of all, start with, you need to lose the ego. There's people who come in and just, it's all about them. They that's an old school hard ass approach to management that's hopefully quickly becoming obsolete. Demonstrate vulnerability, be human. Don't be afraid to show people your own feelings. Shift perspective. This is a big one that I learned, which is, your job as a manager or as a leader of people is to work for them. And when you kind of take that shift in perspective of, wait a second, it's not about me telling them what to do, it's about me helping them achieve their goals. That subtle shift makes a big difference in terms of how people feel when they're working for you, and it just boosts all kinds of good things, including creating an environment of trust and safety, right? So a couple of simple little suggestions, like praise in public, coach in private. How many of us have been chastised in public, and it's by a manager or a leader? It's one of the most humiliating things that you can experience, right? So we want to avoid that at all costs. Be there for them, be fair, be consistent, recognize good work, and all the benefits that fall out of that. You create an environment of psychological safety. There's less stress, there's less fear. You're getting higher performance. That's the bottom line, and that's what we're looking for. And you're you create an environment of openness, transparency, and basically the bottom line, you're getting a lower turnover, and so people are less likely to leave and more willing to stay. So that's tip number 3, lead with compassion. Tip number 4, talk to your people. you know, it's in this day and age, it's more important than ever that leaders communicate candidly and frankly with and frequently about the state of business. You know, people want to hear from you, right? And especially in times of upheaval and disruption. Our natural inclination is to try and make sense of what's going on. So if we're not hearing the information, we as humans have this thing where we want to fill in the gaps. And unfortunately, what that does is we tend to go to worst case scenario, and we tend to think of, you know, that everything's going to be bad in a vacuum of information. So talk to people. You know, it's pretty straightforward. And of course, communication is a two-way street. It's a dialogue, not a monologue. And I'm going to talk about the flip side, which is listening, which is the next tip. But one of the recommendations is this term that was coined by an HP executive many years ago, management by walking around. And you know, maybe that's not really possible now. Maybe it's MBZA, management by zooming around. Is that? But the point being, frequent light touch points are much more effective than one single long meeting on a monthly basis, for example. So talk to your people, just reach out to them, be authentic, be appreciative, set clear expectations. Make sure people are clear on what's expected of them. That's a big cause of disengagement, is that the disconnect between expectation and reality. And the benefits of all that, of talking, obviously, are you're going to create more connection, you build trust and resilience in your team, we have aligned expectations, you're reducing all that wasted effort of hearsay, gossip, and stress. And you're also getting faster access to the facts, so you're able to make better decisions, and you empower people so they have greater autonomy, which is a key aspect of engagement. So part two of that is listening to your people. So some of you may be familiar with the company Nortel. Nortel back in the 1990s was on a tear. They were growing massively. It's a Canadian company, if you don't know. Canadian telecom company that built networking equipment. And in the 90s, they were putting in a ton of fiber optic type networking gear because of the growth of the internet. And so their sales were booming. They were just going gangbusters. In fact, at one point, they represented a third of the value of the Toronto Stock Exchange. A third. They were huge. Interestingly, at the time, my wife's cousin was hired. He was from the UK, came over, and he was a consultant at Nortel. And I remember driving him back to the airport, and he was shaking his head, going, I just don't understand why nobody delivers bad news to the executives. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, there's all kinds of bad news coming. It's obvious to everyone that this market is saturated, but nobody's willing to tell the boss. I don't understand you Canadians, he said. Interestingly, a few months later, the .com bubble burst. Nortel went from a stock market high of $124 over the next 12 months to 47 cents. Now, had the executive team felt comfortable in delivering bad news to the boss, maybe they could have done something to avoid it. I mean, a lot of companies were taken out by that situation. But 60,000 people were left unemployed after that. It was the largest bankruptcy case in Canadian history. It's a good illustration of the importance of creating a safe space for people to tell you what's going on, asking for input, appreciating their honesty. Don't shoot the messenger, right? Also clarify assumptions, do something about it, right? People are willing to give you that information, then have the, make sure they know that that you respect it, you're appreciative, and that you're going to do something about it if it is possible. Communicate with them your actions and outcomes, and and just keep doing that. You need to keep reinforcing that it's you want to hear what's going on, and the benefits are manifold. You're better decision making. You get more ideas. You're going to have better business outcomes. Employees are going to feel respected and appreciated and valued. And it's kind of this virtuous cycle that happens, right? You're building dialogue, you're listening, you're talking, you're communicating, you're getting more information, you're making better decisions, you're taking actions, you're creating better outcomes, and you're building more dialogue. So the circle just keeps going. So that's tip number 5, listen to your people. Tip number 6, develop your people. So I had a funny situation happen to me. Yesterday morning, I was working on this presentation. I'd spent probably 8 hours at this point, putting it all together. And as I fired up my system, I got one of these pop-ups that said I've got a virus. And so my cortisol level started going up as I felt some stress from that. And I decided, and I remembered, oh, wait a second, I've got a Geek Squad subscription. I'll call them. So I did that. I reached out, I connected with these folks, and I had like a really positive experience. This young fellow, Agent Justin R, through the chat line, little chat box, and just over text, I just got this feeling that he was so excited and willing and able to help me. He was sometimes you just get that feeling over text. And so as I was waiting for my system to update, I texted him. I said, hey, so what's it like to work at Geek Squad, knowing that I'm working on this presentation and about employee engagement? And that was his reply. He said, I love it. I get to learn new technical problems every day. Every day is different. How often do you hear that? I love it. That's the kind of employee you want. They're doing great work. And not only that, here I am telling you all about it, about how great the service is, and recommending that you get coverage with Geek Squad. It's worth it. And they solved my problem. There was no virus, thank goodness. Gallup, another couple of points about the research that Gallup has done. They found that 2 of the best survey questions for separating enthusiastic, high-performing workers from low-performing, miserable workers is 1, there is someone at work who encourages my development, and 2, I get to use my strengths at work every day. So, when you think about it and you have the right person in the job, you need to ensure that they have what they need to be successful and grow. And if you do that, you're going to boost their engagement level. So invest in learning and development. Make sure your team leaders understand the importance of what role they play in developing people and supporting your people. Their ability to recognize strengths, individual strengths and their aspirations, and then connecting those people to the right roles, that is a super, super critical aspect of management. You obviously need to balance organizational and individual needs, and the benefits, you're going to get more loyalty and commitment, higher productivity, new ideas, greater connection. And if there's people who argue that, hey, I'm worried if we're going to train our people, they're going to leave. Well, Richard Branson has a good response to that. Train them well enough so they can leave, but treat them well enough so they don't. It's pretty good advice. So that's number 6, develop your people. And number 7 is make it a thing, it being employee engagement. It's important to, this point talks the importance of being deliberate about employee engagement. And I use a story here where we had a large customer that was being supported by one team, and that customer, I started getting complaints from the customer that this team wasn't performing, they were making mistakes, there was issues, and I knew internally that this team was in fact having challenges, they weren't getting along so well. You know, there were complaints back and forth. So I went to my leader because I was kind of like at a loss what to do. Should I go talk to the customer, and should I go talk to the employees? And my leader, who, by the way, whom I love, he said, start with your employees. Get them in a room every morning for 30 minutes, starting now, and talk. That's all he said. So I did that, and within a week, that team turned around, became much more cohesive, much more engaged. Customer service levels suddenly went back up. The customer who had been threatening to take their business elsewhere said, "Thank you, everything's great." So we kept them. And the really cool thing is, about a month after all that happened, I was walking through the office, and I heard laughter coming from the cafeteria. I looked in, and that whole team was sitting having lunch together, which they'd never done before. And so, you know, when you take specific intentional steps to boost employee engagement, it's not complicated, right? It's pretty straightforward, and it makes a big difference. So I encourage you to shift your focus. A lot of people think, I got to start with my customer. I need to focus on making sure my customer gets what they need. Let's do some customer experience analysis. Well, as Richard Branson again says, a very wise guy, not a wise guy, a smart guy. Clients don't come first, employees come first. Take care of your employees, and they'll take care of your clients. You won't have to worry about customer experience. So shift your focus to employee engagement. Also, make sure you're getting commitment from all of leadership. If you're going to make this a thing in your organization, everybody has to be part of the thing. So I encourage you to learn about it, talk about it, set goals and objectives in terms of where you want to get to. You know, measurement is obviously critical. Set up a regular cadence so that you are looking at it on a regular basis, and get help if you need it. There's lots of help out there. There's organizations that do this kind of stuff. The Innovation Guelph team has people, mentors. It's stuff that I can help with. So, you know, if you are in need of support, it's available. So that wraps up my 7 tips. Clarify company purpose, define your core values, lead with compassion, talk to your people, listen to your people, develop your people, make it a thing. And that is all I got. Questions?
Well, that's great. That's great, Michael. No, that was really super. Does anybody who's left on the call have any questions? I think you answered a whole lot of questions before they even had them.
Cool.
Michael, that was really amazing. I don't often hear the business perspective coming from this particular place. I've been fortunate to have volunteered at the Crapello Institute Education Center in Lenox, Mass. It's a yoga center, and the principles that I run my business on are based on the way that they manage people and the way that they manage their mission statements and their transparency and consciousness about connecting on a very real level with everyone that they work with, and in turn everyone that we work with. And this, you're speaking the same language, and I wasn't sure that's what I was going to hear today, so I just wanted to say thank you. And and I really love that affirmation that I'm on the right track. I'm not too woo, right? Oftentimes being a yoga teacher and in the world of healing and that sort of thing, we often end up out there in the left field of woo, of things that are a little too feely. And like we talk about how I say I love you to my clients on a regular basis. I say I love you to our teachers and our volunteers and our team members. and it's not a bad word, right? And I think it's time for us to transition to loving the people around us and allowing ourselves to have that intimacy of, we spend more time with them than we do most of our family, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Excellent point. Well said. I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you.
it's honestly, it's a lot of the stuff that I've learned over the last couple of years, as I say, in learning about culture and learning about values. I wish I had known this as when I was actually in the corporate world, but it's got me so inspired. That's why I want to share it with people and help them avoid the mistakes that I made. But you're right. I think the reality is people have a little bit of maybe fear of coming across as, like you say, woo, or sappy, or some of those other words. But the reality is, it's a business is about humans talking to humans, and if we just treat each other well and are respectful, and think about put ourselves in their shoes, and all that kind of, it's the golden rule. Some of that real basic stuff that for some reason sometimes seems to get forgotten in business. So I 100% agree.
Michael, when you send us your updated version of like the final slides you had, would you mind including some links to those employee surveys and questionnaires that you posted in there, or ones that are similar, so we can send those out as well?
Will do. Okay.
So before everybody go, by all means, if you do have a question, keep typing. I just wanted to say thank you, Michael. I really appreciate your lessons today and talking to all of us. Thank you so much for being here. Jordan has posted a feedback form in the chat. Please click on it and share your thoughts with us on this session, and also just on the Toolkit Tuesdays series in general. Let us know if there's a topic that you would like us to present on. Feel free to follow us on social media and tweet and post about your experiences here with us today and every day. We would love to hear from you. So again, just a really quick thank you to Michael, to our SLEO interpreters, Liz and Candice, to our sponsors, of course, to Jordan, and to all of you. Thank you very much for being here today. Stick around. We have about 10 more minutes if you have any questions. But if you do have to go, have a great afternoon, and do come back again soon. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, folks.
So I'm not sure if there's any more questions. There's still a few people on the call. So if you're here and have questions, please feel free to post some questions.
I actually put a couple of questions in the next slide.
Oh, you'll have to share again, Michael. I took over, sorry.
So in the last company I worked for, there was a fellow who was one of my peers, and his last name start with the letter Z, and so we used to call him Zed, and he was one of those types that would always ask the tough questions. It's like he just had no fear of putting it out there and asking questions that everybody else was kind of like, oh yeah, I didn't think of that. And so I've tried to put myself in Zed's shoes and think of a couple of questions that people might be pondering. So for example, this is the typical kind of question he would ask. Hey, we're doing fine. The company's doing well. We're hitting our numbers. Why should I care about spending any time or money or resource on employee surveys? So the kind of the subtext to that question, I would say, is, does high performance indicate high engagement? And the answer is no, doesn't necessarily. There's lots of reasons that companies do well, right? It could be luck, it could be customer, or one particular customer win, or a competitor that failed, or just timing, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, those don't be fooled or distracted by the fact that you know, there's high revenues, there's high growth. That's not necessarily an indicator of high engagement. High engagement will result in those things over time, but you know, it's not a direct collaboration. And then, you know, another sort of subtext question is, what are the indicators of low engagement? And so, you know, some of those red flags that I would recommend that business leaders look at that are indicators of low engagement: high turnover rates, lots of absenteeism, people, you know, high costs of health, you know, health care and benefits, that sort of thing. You know, look for conflict in the organization. You know, those are some of the kind of the key red flags that business leaders should be looking at and going, okay, I need to look a little bit deeper and maybe do some digging. So that was one question. The other question I think I kind of addressed, which is on the subject of you know, my employees are satisfied. Isn't that good enough? And as I said, employee satisfaction and employee engagement are not the same. Satisfaction is merely it's good enough. I'm getting a paycheck. I'm putting in my time. Potentially, I'm satisfied. Whereas engagement is, again, next level. Another question is, why don't I just get rid of my low performers and just keep all my high performers? Well, that's for one thing, you know, how are you defining high PO and low PO is a very subjective kind of assessment. And so, you know, is that accurate? Is it valid? Are people able to really determine somebody's potential without any kind of bias or subjectivity? That's a tough thing to ask of a manager. And furthermore, a low PO, or you know, what we call a low PO, could actually be a potential high PO. I have an employee that was almost out the door until we switched it to another team, and the next year she went to President's Club because of her performance. So, you know, don't give up on those low POs. I don't actually like those terms. And then the last question from Zed, as a leader, how much influence do I really have on my employees' level of engagement? Is it really up to me? I mean, for sure, there's both their own experience and that there's certain types of people that just will never be engaged, right? There's those employees that are always just gonna come in and try and do the bare minimum to get their paycheck. And you can try, but you know, sometimes it's better just to cut bait on those types. But generally speaking, most people will respond to some effort. And if you're not sure that the leader has an impact on employee performance and engagement, then just look at this picture. Right? Which picture of Anthony Fauci is he working for Biden, and which one's he working for Trump? It's pretty obvious.
That's a good picture. Proves your point, doesn't it?
And that says it all. Yeah. Like even the color of his skin, for heaven's sakes. My goodness. So that's all I got.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael.
A pleasure. It was a pleasure. Thank you for the time. I really appreciate it.
That was wonderful. So we'll follow up with everyone in the next few days. Hopefully by the end of Thursday, early Friday, we'll have the slides to you and everything will be posted up on our YouTube channel. We'll include whatever links and websites we can. And we just wish you a wonderful afternoon. So thank you for joining us.